Here we go. Professor Comitas.
Professor Dugan.
May I come in?
You may come in.
Thank you.
Come in.
Thank you.
When you set forth for Ithaca, pray that the journey be long, full of adventures, full of knowledge. The Lastrygonians and the Cyclops, angry Poseidon, fear them not. Such you'll never find along your way if your thoughts are lofty, if select emotions touch your spirit and your flesh. The Lastrygonians and the Cyclops, fierce Poseidon, you'll not encounter if you don't hold them to in your soul, if you don't conjure them up before you. Pray that the journey be long, that many be the summer morns, with what pleasure, with what joy you enter harbors first time seen, and stop at ports Phoenician, and acquire wares of beauty, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, and sensuous scents of all sorts, as many as you can, excesses of sensuous sense. To many Egyptian cities go, to learn, and to learn from the learned.
With his own work and experiences as guide, Lambros has shaped how his students, anthropologists in the making, sojourn from the confines of their own lives and habits of culture to form understandings of their new roles in society and their relationships to the field. In a lecture delivered in 1989, Lambros reflected explicitly on the field as educator. End quote. More than just rite de passage, the field is both crucible and molder of anthropologists, a placid depository of that which must be known, teacher to those willing to learn, stern judge of those who come to it with preconceptions. End quote. Lambros' own fieldwork, at a fundamental level, centers on exploring questions about the relationship between individuals and societies, and the conflicts that stem from changing modes of governance and economics at local and state levels. The work of anthropology, as an applied science, informs understandings of the world in specific socio-historical contexts. The production of knowledge through research is inherently a political act with potentially far-reaching impact, and as such, with fieldwork comes a moral and ethical responsibility situated between objective data collection and advocacy for just social reform. Lambros embodies the understanding he teaches. A brief survey of his fieldwork reveals the breadth of experience he has to draw on: Barbados, Jamaica, Bolivia, Dominican Republic, Greece, USSR, and the co-principality of Andorra. This broad body of fieldwork, from 3 decades, continues to be praised around the world as courageous and cutting edge, and still influences research on the topics of social organization, education, rural life, and the effects of drugs on society. Lambros was also an influential liberal American voice in Caribbean and Latin American education, academia, politics, and affairs generally during the 1960s and 70s, being personally known, respected, and consulted by many of the regional leaders of those decades. Notably, his relationship with Jamaican Prime Minister Michael Manley led to Lambros arranging a Columbia University lectureship position for the statesman through 1984, an incredible opportunity for students of the Caribbean. Lambros' work demonstrates the significance of anthropological research to perspectives and policies as he examines the relationship between social institutions, historical circumstances, and the lives of individuals. Resonating through each of his students as they venture into the field, along with warm stories of serendipitous mishap and unexpected findings, from playing cards on a boat in Jamaica to chicken sacrifices in Bolivia, is his precautionary adage for the practice of an open-eyed and socially conscious anthropology. End quote. While very real dangers abound in the indiscriminate application of anthropology to real-life problems, these dangers cannot be circumvented in these days of crisis and rapid change by an anthropology in a blindfold." End quote.
Lambros has also made significant contributions in theory, most notably his concept of occupational multiplicity, which came out of his 1962 doctoral dissertation at Columbia on fishermen and cooperation in rural Jamaica, a study of 5 Jamaican fishing villages. Lambros defined occupational multiplicity as a situation wherein the modal adult is systematically engaged in a number of gainful activities which form for him an integrated economic complex. This concept was introduced in contrast of earlier work, which only saw in categories of rural peasants and urban proletariats. He wanted to show that Caribbean people made every effort to take hold of their own destiny. His point was to affirm the agency of the people and to show that they, in fact, never accepted the subordinate positions which history had so far reserved for them. While the concept indeed comes from another time and was much debated through the 1970s and 80s, one may wonder openly what its significance might yet reveal for those thinking and writing in the present day about the increasing precarity caused by the purported innovative gig or platform economies.
Throughout his career, Lambros produced a voluminous amount of ethnographic photographs and films. Barbados, Jamaica, Greece, the homeland of his parents, who originally thought he was going to be an anthropophago, a cannibal, which isn't far from how a lot of anthropologists end up. Where else? The former Soviet Republic of Georgia, Spain, Andorra, Canada. Yet, as happens with many anthropologists, his visual material is much less known than his textual production. It's unfortunate, not only for the richness of the photographic register in terms of ethnographic documentation, but especially for the fact that Lambros's photos, they have the qualities that transcend his work as a social scientist, revealing a talented artist and a humane, extraordinary person. Photographs provide us with information about the reality documented, but also about the photographer's point of view. We can see through Lambros's Caribbean and Bolivian pictures the perspective of a young anthropologist in the early moments of his career.
So in the university, they want to see our interpretation of prophecy if is one to go on the record. The universities make them research. Them don't satisfy with them university write off Rastafari, them no Rasta. Them want we write off ourselves. Now speaking of prophecy, prophetical, our language were beaten out of us. It happened natural too. We learn it through prophecy, through history, and we learn it natural. That slave master, who learned anything about slavery, learned that slave master beat you. Who learned that? All we learned that slave master beat we. And then beat we talk to each other. Good. We mustn't talk with language to each other. And then beat we and teach we. His language or dialect.
If you look up here, this incredibly long row of black file boxes, all of which have people's names on them. Explain to those of us who don't know what this is, what this represents.
These are copies of the dissertations of students that I've basically sponsored, but there may be others who I was on the committee chaired. But they are basically all of them in anthropology, though there are some from other fields that I was involved with. And they go back
after some arm twisting by a friend, Lambros put together a database of the names, years, and dissertation titles of his PhD students. By coincidence, the spreadsheet had exactly 100 students. The final PhD on this 2014 list was Lambros's 100th PhD. The number 100 is generally a milestone marker. It should trigger off a celebration. So a celebration is indeed in order, Lambros. It's really an amazing story. I've heard senior anthropologists boast of 20 or 30 PhDs. Lambros mentored 100. That places him in a unique N of one category, certainly in anthropology, probably in most academic fields. What's even more amazing, though, many of his students have already retired. Some of them have been graced with obituaries. Lambros, at the age of 90, still takes public transportation to his TC office 5 times a week. He's outlived many of his students and has certainly outworked most of them. Now, most professors have to fit into pre-existing teaching programs. Not Lambros. With his fresh Columbia PhD in hand, he was catapulted northward across 120th Street in the 1960s to Teachers College. They gave him the mandate of designing an anthropology program from scratch. What emerged reflected his own Greek immigrant down-to-earth philosophy. First, he militantly defined his TC program as applied anthropology. His was one of the first programs with that then controversial label. Secondly, students had to get somewhere to the field in their first summer. They had to take notes. They had to write up and present to others their findings. And thirdly, it wasn't social work. It was bona fide, full-fledged anthropology. Students were exposed to a broad gamut of anthropological theories, and they chose mainstream anthropological research topics for their dissertations. The research of these students spanned the globe. Lambros may be an N of one, not only in the number of students, but in the number of islands, territories, and countries where his students carried out dissertation research. This 100-student cohort went to 39 different countries in the Caribbean, North and South America, Asia, Europe, Eurasia, Mexico, Central America, the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Micronesia. And this doesn't even count their post-PhD research sites, which may easily double Lambros's global outreach. Lambros militantly rejected the widespread elitist notion that post-PhD non-academic employment somehow reflected a failure to make it into the ivory tower. Many of his students explicitly chose non-academic careers. An obsolete ivory tower mindset, however, still contaminates many PhD programs in cultural anthropology in an age where the statistical probability of tenure-track academic employment for new cultural anthropologist PhDs has dwindled to insignificance. In that sense, Lambros's program can be seen as an evolutionary pre-adaptation to a dilemma in cultural anthropology that would take decades to surface. Congratulations, Lambros, from all of your students.
Always have Ithaca on your mind. Arrival there is your journey's end, but do not rush the trip one whit. Better it lasts for many years, and you reach the isle when already old. Rich with all you've gained along the way, without expecting Ithaca to give you riches. Ithaca gave you that splendid voyage. Without her, you couldn't have ventured forth, but she has nothing left to give you. And if you find her poor, Ithaca hasn't fooled you. As wise as you've become, with such experience, by now you must have understood what mean these Ithacas. I was senile at the age of 40. I'm going to be even more senile at the age of 80, but you can't get me out.